Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me start with some macro thoughts. The pound surged over through 130, last trading at 130.41, after the chief EU negotiator pledged a unique deal for the UK. So a big short covering rally going on. It's carried us up to 130.40 last. Home thoughts. The rare desert lions of Namibia are rapidly facing extinction. Here is a male around the Kunene region of Namibia. Incredible photograph, and they're such grand and wonderful animals. The last time we were in the Savo at Finch Hatton's, we could hear the roar of the lions as if they were just outside Nishiton's sleep a wink. And in fact, they were just outside our tent. And Finch Hatton's is open, so they really are right outside without any protection, really, except for the elevation of the tent. Flying over Africa, ibis between clouds and sunset, Kenya 2018, Laurent photographer. It's a mercy that time runs in one direction only, that we see the past but darkly, and the future not at all. The past only comes back when the present runs so smoothly that it is like the sliding surface of a deep river. Virginia Woolf wrote some years before she filled her coat pockets with stones and waded into the river Ouse. Rivers may be among our richest existential metaphors. Time is a river which sweeps me along, but I am the river, Borges proclaimed in his timeless meditation on time. A river passing through a landscape catches the world and gives it back redoubled. A shifting, glinting world more mysterious than the one we customarily inhabit. Rivers run through our civilizations like strings through beads. And there's hardly an age I can think of that's not associated with its own great waterway. The lands of the Middle East have dried to tinder now, but once they were fertile, fed by the fruitful Euphrates and the Tigris, from which rose flowering Sumer and Babylonia. The riches of ancient Egypt stem from the Nile, which was believed to mark the causeway between life and death, and which was twinned in the heavens by the spill of the stars we now call the Milky Way. The Indus Valley, the Yellow River, these are the places where civilizations began, fed by sweet waters that in their flooding enriched the land. The art of writing was independently born in these four regions, and I do not think it is a coincidence that the advent of the written word was nourished by river water. And they've posted a tremendous photograph from, I think, the sort of early 1900s of the Congo River as well, which is the image you see. Political reflections. McCain's 106-year-old mum, Roberta, is expected to attend his memorial services in Washington. I said mothers burying their sons. It's never a good thing. New York Times, with ships and missiles, China is ready to challenge the US Navy in the Pacific. Talking about the 69th anniversary of the founding of China's Navy, the country's first domestically built aircraft carrier stirred from its berth port city of Dalian on the Bohai Sea, tethered to tugboats for a test of its seaworthiness. China's first homegrown aircraft carrier just moved a bit, and the United States, Japan, and India squirmed, a military news website crowed, referring to the three nations China views as its main rivals. Not long ago, such boasts would have been dismissed as the bravado of a second-string military, no longer. It's an excellent essay. Let me just take out some key points. China is now capable of controlling the South China Sea in all scenarios is short of war with the United States. The new commander of the United States Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Philip S. Davidson, acknowledged in written remarks submitted during his Senate confirmation process in March. He described China as a peer competitor, gaining on the United States not by matching its forces weapon by weapon, but by building critical asymmetrical capacities, which is an interesting point. When two American warships, the Higgins, a destroyer, and the Antietam, a cruiser, sailed within a few miles of disputed islands in the Paracels in May, Chinese vessels rushed to challenge what Beijing later denounced as a provocative act. China did the same to 3 Australian ships passing through the South China Sea in April. While every branch of China's armed forces lags behind the United States in firepower and experience, China has made significant gains in asymmetrical weaponry to blunt America's advantage. One focus has been in what American military planners call 82AD for anti-access, anti-area denial, or what the Chinese call counter-intervention. The centerpiece of this strategy is an arsenal of high-speed ballistic missiles designed to strike moving ships. The latest versions, DF-21D and DF-26, are popularly known as carrier killers since they can threaten the most powerful vessels in the American fleet long before they get close to China. Such missiles pose a particular challenge to American commanders because neutralizing them might require an attack deep inside Chinese territory, which would be a major escalation. The American Navy has never faced such a threat before, the Congressional Research Office warned in a report in May, adding that some analysts consider the missiles game-changing. Lyle Morris, an analyst with the RAND Corporation, said that China's deployment of missiles in the disputed Paracel and Spratly Islands will dramatically change how the US military operates across the Asia and the Pacific. Now, August last year, I said apart from a few half-hearted and timid follow-ups, articles reporting on those freedom of navigation operations, China has established control over the South China Sea. It has created artificial islands, militarized those artificial islands across the South China Sea. It is a mind-boggling geopolitical advance, any which way you care to cut it. Further conclusions: the trade war's target, in my view, is China, and Mr. Trump to date has been rattling Xi Jinping's pedestal, or is it a golden cage? And that is because it's a strongman conundrum. If you are the strongman, making yourself president for life means you are, then you've placed yourself on a pedestal, and you own the problem. Furthermore, I think Trump is relishing his financial warfare strategies. He has Khamenei on the run, Maduro is being attacked by a remote-controlled drone, and the economy has collapsed, and Xi looks suddenly ever so fragile. And I was referring to a Chicky run, and then Neil Kashkari played on that in his story yesterday. Trump has now turned his attention to Xi Jinping and thrown in the keys, challenging him to a Chicky run. This is the latest statement from the White House regarding Chinese support for North Korea. Donald Trump feels strongly that North Korea is under tremendous pressure from China because of our major trade disputes with the Chinese government, he said. Let's go to the currency markets because we've seen a bit of movement here. Let's start with the euro dollar back above 117. It's been playing with 117. I think it got as high as 117.50, but here we are at 117.13. Quite a recovery from the lows seen earlier this year. Not so recently, then quite recently. Dollar index 94.59. 94 is a key area for that. Japanese yen 111.61. Swiss franc 0.9709. That's strengthened as well. The pound, of course, is the big story, 130.35. The Australian dollar has not been recovering. 0.7298. This morning was at 0.7279, so that's getting a bounce too. India rupee at a fresh record low, 70.675. South Korean won 1109.15. Brazilian real 410.66. Egyptian pound 17.8955. And the rand, where we saw a big rally momentarily below 14, but it's sold off again. Dollar index last I checked was at 94.59. I think it's a buy closer to 94 for an eventual move to 100. Euro dollar, I think you fade the rallies. But at this point in time, I'm on the sideline. I'd like to say that 117.50 before I started thinking about that. Tesla bond yields are the highest since they were launched. This is from Sun Chartist, and I was thinking to myself, it's the bond vigilantes who are going to have Elon Musk for dinner. I do not short cryptos, but if I did, Ethereum would be high on my list if the daily chart pennant is completed. That's Peter Albrecht. Gold back at 12.05. I'm expecting it to break to the downside again once the market finds its footing and the dollar resumes its upwards march. Crude oil, that's been firm, $69.66 last. Obviously a number of things happening there. Geopolitical stress, a drawdown in US reserves also. Look at this is soybeans, completes possible head and shoulders failure with first target at $7.86. That's Peter again who's called this right, but essentially what it's telling me is that the soybeans are obviously at the bleeding edge of this tariff war, and the Chinese response has been to target the farm economy. Emerging markets, 5th of February this year, I started getting very bearish, and I said, interestingly, JP Morgan's MB spread is down to 258 basis points, the tightest since mid-2014. How long this lasts, I said, is anybody's guess. And emerging market carry traders have had their worst August on record. Bloomberg Currency Index that tracks carry trade returns from 8 emerging markets funded by short positions in the dollar has slumped to more than 5% since the end of July, set for its biggest August drop since Bloomberg started compiling the data in 1999. No one wants to be a hero during August, said Manulife Asset Seagal. And I was referring to this in my piece, The End of Halcyon Days, when I was talking about, that moment of the Halcyon Days being a period of calm before the storms come. And I was saying, we are exiting that period of calm. Indian rupee closed at 70.585, a fresh record low. I think it's trading 70.675. Sensex follows Nifty to the upper end of the rising channel and forms an engulfing bear candlestick pattern. That's from somebody I've started following India charts. Argentina has asked the IMF to speed up its agreed upon payments. Meanwhile, the peso is at a new record low versus the dollar. And that took me back to mirrors on the ceiling. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. My piece on the 13th of August was called Cold Turkey. Have a read if you want. President Trump obviously has embraced a strong dollar, coercive financial warfare, and of course tweeted on the 16th of August, our economy is doing better than ever, money is pouring into our cherished dollar like rarely before. Company earnings are higher than ever, inflation is low, business optimism is higher than it has ever been. And the one feeling the brunt of that is really the Turkish lira. Turkish economic confidence plunged to 83.9 in August, which is the lowest since 2009, nearly a 10-year low. Turkey's lira remains under pressure despite central bank efforts to tighten liquidity. Let's move on to Sub-Saharan Africa. Mad how people were happy buying Zambia 5-year dollar bonds at under 6%. Now yields 15.5% and trades 70 cents on the dollar. I did, Ronak Gopaldas was writing an article in April, hazards ahead if African Eurobond rally comes to a sudden nasty end. And I was saying in that article that there was likely to be a big ticket blow up and that this would be the catalyst for a sell-off. And I said Zambia looks like a likely candidate. I got interviewed for Sputnik for the first time. Theresa May's pledge to become G7's biggest investor in Africa, I said, is a big ask. She announced plans to boost Britain's investment in Africa after Brexit during her first trip to the continent as Prime Minister. Made a speech in Cape Town, pledged £4 billion in support of African economies, wanted to create jobs for young people and make Britain the G7's biggest overseas investor in Africa ahead of the US. She was in Nigeria yesterday, she's landed here in Nairobi this morning. By 2022, I want the UK to be the G7's #1 investor in Africa, she said, with Britain's private sector companies taking the lead. I want to create a new partnership between the UK and our friends in Africa built around shared prosperity. I said that Britain had a lot of leverage in Africa because of the historic links from its empire and Commonwealth. I consider myself one of that components that they can leverage because I was educated in Britain and born here. And I was doing an interview this morning on Citizen. Suddenly came back to my mind. When I was about 15, I was walking in the less salubrious neighbourhood of London and I got mugged. And the guy said to me, "You bloody Paki." And all I remember as he hit me in the face was saying, "Actually, I'm not a Pakistani." But that was lost on him. He said he suspected that I said I suspected £4 billion was not new money that had come from other budgets, but with a sharp focus on the youth dynamic. I said Britain preceded China in the US and is seeking to play to that advantage. This is largely a born-free generation, and the UK is wise to play to that theme for multiple and overlapping reasons, I said. But I'm saying that to become the G7's biggest investor in Africa is a big ask. Reason being, France is targeting Anglophone Africa. Macron's France is coming to Theresa's match, aggressively targeting Anglophone Africa. US is seeking to roll back China and will certainly put more money to work. If you look at the North American remittances into Africa and at portfolio flow capital, then the US looks likely to stay ahead. China, as I said, remains the biggest overseas investor in Africa, but it is not in the G7. I said China had a singular positive influence on Africa. It rebalanced the demand side for Africa's commodities and also bought those commodities on a long-term basis. It was this which triggered the African recovery about 2 decades ago. However, since then, I said, a freewheeling China Inc. has favorited elites, has facilitated large-scale looting via the inflation of these big infrastructure projects, some of which were white elephants on day one, and has lumped, I think, the African citizen with the tab. How this plays out is now the key to Sino-African relations going forward. A Hambantota scenario would be problematic, I said. Sri Lanka had to give up the port for 99 years. Miss May will meet President Kenyatta. They're meeting right now. He's just returned from seeing President Trump. He's had some big-ticket interactions of late. Talking about the economies that are doing well, I said Ethiopia, Senegal, Ghana, Ivory Coast, but I said it's been very lopsided growth. Trickle-down has been anemic, and that the secret is to unleash human capital and connect it to the 21st century. Look at internet speeds. Ethiopia's model of wild good has run out of cash, I said. Africa's fastest growing economies, this is from Zemedene. Africa's growing contribution to the world economy will be home to some of the fastest growing economies in the coming years. Ethiopia is to record the fastest growth in real GDP terms. It's from Euromonitor. The entire African continent accounts for just 3% of all UK goods and services exports. By contrast, Europe takes the lion's share, 54%. So you see the disparity in what we're talking about in the numbers. UK's trade presence in Africa was not always this small until the late 1990s. Britain accounted for nearly 7% of the continent's imports. Now that share has dropped to just over 2%. Africa's goods imports, this is a chart from the FT. Chinese goods exports to Africa are 8 times larger than those of the UK and even bigger than the top 3 exporters, Germany, France and the US combined. So it's interesting developments. I think this pivot to the Commonwealth has legs, but one's got to be realistic. In Uganda, a singer, a president, and a generational fight for Africa, Financial Times' David Pilling, they called him the ghetto president. The Ugandan singer and activist Bobby Wine, born in a Kampala slum and now a member of parliament, is facing charges of treason. The accusation stems from an incident in which protesters allegedly threw stones at the motorcade of the actual President Yoweri Museveni. But Mr. Wine's real crime is more simple. At 36 and in touch with Uganda's youthful population, he is half the age and twice as popular as his 74-year-old nemesis. This phrase of David's caught my attention. There are Bobby Wines all over Africa. He's spot on. Rapid urbanization and the spread of social media have enabled a generation of young people to express their frustrations and cross-fertilize ideas. Those who know Museveni say he genuinely believes he alone can lead the country, like the general in his labyrinth, surrounded with hangers-on, flatterers. He's convinced he's loved. That is why Mr. Wine is so dangerous. With the mockery of a well-honed lyric, he pierces the armor of presidential vanity. What used to be democracy has now become hypocrisy, he sings. And of course, this takes me back to 2014, when Blaise Compaoré was overthrown in Ouagadougou. And I said then, and it applies now, what's clear is that a very young, very informed, very connected African youth dynamic and demographic, which many characterize as a demographic dividend, which turned into a demographic terminator, beautiful Blaise Compaoré's case. And I said this is set to alter the existing equilibrium between the rulers and the subjects, and a rebalancing has begun. It's exactly what you're seeing happen in front of your eyes in Uganda. Why South Africa should be afraid of the economic big bad wolf, great article by Ronan Gopaldas, well worth reading in full, saying about here's the really worrying thing: Turkey is not even the most important risk to consider. Even before the most recent bout of volatility, there had been a feeling among financial markets that we were approaching an inflection point. After a Goldilocks period, low interest rates facilitated by low inflation, the tide is finally starting to shift. And with that, all will change. Have a read, it's really very good. I, as I said on the 27th of August, think that Rand is caught in the crossfire, that Trump, the linguistic and financial warfare specialist, is the machine gun, and the Tsar is in its line of fire. South African oil shares up 1.11%. That's a good recovery after that 10-cent related sell-off. Dollar rand, last time I looked, 14.4067, but it probably improves from here a little bit, and then we can resell it. Nigerian oil shares down 7.54% this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange is up 8.73% this year. The International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes ordered the Tanzanian electric supply company to pay Standard Chartered $148.4 million after breaching a power contract. This is where this antagonistic approach that Magufuli has taken ends up. Once you get to these arbitration courts, they're not interested in the politics. Ebola outbreak in North Kivu, Democratic Republic of Congo, could be the worst ever in East Africa. Total of 112 confirmed and probable cases, 75 deaths. The outbreak's toll is already high. Recent spread of Ebola to Oicha, an area surrounded by multiple armed groups, poses significant logistical and security management challenges. The IRC is distressed about a potential repeat of the 2014 Ebola outbreak if immediate and sufficient international response is not forthcoming. In some areas, local communities have resisted following up of contacts as well as safe burials, critical for outbreak control. October, when we had that last big outbreak, I said, this is 2014, that Ebola is about its escape velocity. That viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. Look at this photograph of lions roaming through the Nairobi National Park in Kenya, while major railway construction happens in the background. That was from The Guardian. Kenyan lawmakers propose keeping the rate cap. Kenya's parliament defied a bid by the Treasury to remove a cap on commercial interest rates that's crimped bank lending. Um, the odds of a new facility are quite slim, and the market may pay more attention to this. This is Gibran Qureshi at Stanbic. Whereas Kenya doesn't face a balance of payments crisis at present, the credibility that is attached to an IMF approval or acknowledgement should not be discounted. The 6-month extension to the IMF facility expires on September the 14th. The draft law must now be submitted to Kenyatta for his assent. I agree with Gibran. I think the market has changed considerably. It's trying to go toe-to-toe with the IMF is a singularly poor idea. Sanlam reported first half earnings per share negative 10 shillings and 50 cents a share. Gross written premium income was up just under 1%. Total income down 14.144%. Operating and other expenses up 27.986%. Impairment of financial assets. This is the key point. 1.152 billion shillings. This obviously had a knock-on effect on the P&L, and the question is really, have they taken the whole hit? Because it's not. I know they had some Imperial Bank bonds. I'm not sure if they had Nakamat commercial paper, and maybe ARM, for all I know. But that's the main issue there. It's not looking too clever at the moment. Nairobi all shares up 1.12% year to date. The NSE 20 is down 12.48%. And if you've got all the way here, I have a confession to make. Didn't have any lunch yesterday. We went to a cocktail reception from Ovenpick, which is rather lovely. Lots of good food and good drinks. But then I found myself, like I found myself when I was 15 or 16, in a lot of trouble. But thankfully, all was well. Thank you for stopping by.